Hey, what's going on guys? Arekkz here, and today I want to talk about Legends of Runeterra. For those of you guys that haven't necessarily been following this too much, maybe you've missed it or haven't had a chance to play yet, then Legends of Runeterra is of course a card game based on the League of Legends world, Runeterra, where you utilize various different regions and their champions in order to beat your opponents. If you guys have caught some of the content we've done on this channel, you'll know that we also like to play card games. That's another one of the many genres that we dabble in, and with this now available, or at least kind of in a preview phase, we had a chance to jump in. I thought it'd be handy to put together a beginner's guide, an ultimate beginner's guide, to kind of go over all the core fundamentals in this game for those of you guys that might have a chance to jump in. Maybe you are just sort of wanting to know more. So today I want to break this down into kind of four main components. We'll go over the overview of the game, give you the kind of typical breakdown, and then we'll talk about your game flow, we'll talk about combat, we'll talk about card types, and just in general give you the kind of main things you need to know to get started. So, if you do enjoy this, then a like would be super appreciated. Comment down below if you have any questions. If you guys have been playing this yourselves, by all means let us know how you guys have been getting on, if this is something you guys are looking forward to. And of course, if you want to see more of this on the channel, then also similarly let us know. Now, let's start at the top. What exactly is this game? As mentioned, it's a card game based on the League of Legends world, and in kind of typical sort of card game fashion, if you've played other games within this genre, Magic or other stuff like that, then the format will be largely speaking familiar. You start the match with 20 HP, and if you're League of Legends players, this kind of represents your Nexus, and once your enemy's Nexus health is at 0, you guessed it, you win the match. Now in the main format, you have a deck comprised of 40 cards, which can be a mix of a maximum of 2 of the 6 regions currently available. Each region has a specific theme to their cards, which then lets them stand out from each other. So to go over those regions, you have Demacia, which is all about strength in numbers, containing many low-cost units and cards to buff and protect them. So if you kind of want that sort of rush playstyle, this might be one for you. You then have Freljord, which is all about the big, high-cost units that can overwhelm the enemy, controlling the effects that weaken key enemy units, as well as having some of these sort of key ramp mechanics to help you get those high-cost cards out as soon as possible. Slightly more commitment, but of course, if you want to be big and flashy, then this might be for you. The next region, Ionia, has access to cards that can be kind of difficult for an opponent to deal with, such as units that can't be blocked via normal means, units that strike first in combat, as well as effects that remove enemy units from play temporarily. Noxus is one of the most aggressive playstyles, having a ton of direct damage options as well as high damage, low defense units. Piltover and Zorn has access to a ton of spells, as well as units that can also, have effects that take advantage of this. They also have mechanics that can refill your spell mana gauge, which is useful for, of course, the very heavy spell archetype. And then finally, you have the Shadow Isles, which focuses on units that have extra value when they die, as well as mechanics that sacrifice units in order to achieve powerful results. So that is kind of like a top level summary of your regions. You will then typically choose 2 of these to start formulating your team, your deck, in order to move into the game. Now when you want to start looking at the game flow, once you've kind of got your team assembled, at the start of the match, both players will draw 4 cards each, and you're allowed to mulligan as many of those cards as you want, so you can then draw new cards in their place. But it's worth noting you can only mulligan once. To be clear, for those of you guys that don't necessarily play card games too much, mulligan basically just means you can ditch your hand and draw new cards. So if you maybe drew like a really bad hand and you don't think it's going to be a good way to start, you can basically redraw those again. But keep in mind, you can only mulligan once. There is no penalty for doing this, and of course you draw as many cards as you put back into the deck, but principally you have one chance and then you're into the game. At the beginning of the round, each player gains a mana crystal up to a maximum of 10 by round 10, and one player will have access to an attack token, which is shown as a sword on their side of the field. This is the player who can initiate combat this round. When a round ends, this token is then passed to the other player in a constant cycling motion. And a round ends when both players pass their turn back to back. Now this is important because unlike other card games, players do not end their turn after playing anything they want to. Instead, each time a card is played or an action is taken, the opposing player is then given a chance to either pass or play any of their cards given that they have enough mana. This creates a really interesting kind of dynamic where you want to think carefully about what you want to play or what you do play, as your opponent will then have a chance to retaliate. However, there are of course exceptions to this rule, as you'll see a little bit later. Passing a turn with reserved mana will then bank it as a spell mana, which you can store up to a total of 3, and this is special mana that can only be used to cast spell cards. Now, when you then move into the combat phase, the player who has the attack token can initiate combat at any time, as long as they have units on the field. The player with the attack token is shown by the sword emblazoned on their side of the field, and assuming it hasn't been used up, it is shown as a filled sword gauge on the right hand side. They can then drag their units from the bench onto the field. It's important to note that units attack from left to right, so any effects that might trigger as a result will trigger in that order. Once attacks have then been declared, the defending player can then choose to either block attacking units with their own units. Each individual attacker can only be blocked by one individual defender. Blockers cannot team up on one attack. If an attacker is left unblocked, the defending player's nexus will then take damage, effectively direct damage to the player, much like you're familiar with in other card games. Another thing to note is that once a blocker has been declared, even if they are killed before the attacks are resolved, your nexus will not take damage from that attacking unit. Units also do not recover health automatically, or the damage dealt is permanent unless either healed or removed by an external effect. Now, with the combat basics explained, it's also very important to understand your main card types. There are 3 main card types in this game. You have allies, champions, and spells. Allies are non-champion unit cards that can make up the bulk of your deck, with card effects that fit around the theme of the region they come from. They all have a basic attack and health stat, which you can see at the bottom of the card, as well as a mana cost. Champions are powerful cards based on the core League of Legends roster. They also have basic attack and health stats. They have access to powerful abilities and effects, as well as a unique level up mechanic. Meeting the requirements for the level up transforms the champion into a stronger version of itself that has access to new abilities and even greater stats. And you can have up to a total of 6 of these champions in a deck at once. And then finally, spells are single-use effects that occur as soon as they are played on the field. Spells come with 3 speed types: burst, fast, and slow. Burst spells can be played before, during, or after combat and have the added bonus of not passing your turn, so you can still play another card. Fast spells is the same, but it does use your turn, allowing the opponent to follow up. Meanwhile, slow can only be used outside of combat and still uses up your turn, allowing the opponent again to follow up. With all of that in place, that then kind of gives you your typical flow for your Runeterra matches. The idea again being you then work your way through, take your opponent's health down, ideally whittling them down to 0, and then bringing home that victory. Now there are of course additional activities, additional things to do outside of the core combat experience, but for the time being, as a means to kind of get you into the game, give you a kind of quick breakdown and understand what it is you need to do to be playing, then that is effectively your beginner guide. Hopefully that's helped shed some light on the game for you. Hopefully it's now maybe sort of piqued your interest. Of course, if you guys do have more questions or you do want to see more from this game, by all means let us know. There may be sort of more specific things you want to know about. There may be certain tactics or things like that, or maybe even kind of decks, different things like that. It is of course right now in a preview window, but as and when it sort of comes and goes, we will be continuing to cover this. So again, if you guys want to know stuff, let me know down below. I really hope you guys enjoyed that video. Remember to hit that subscribe button and also click on the little bell icon to turn on notifications so you don't miss my next upload. Also, don't forget, you can check out TwoSixNine and Paradise Central streaming over on Twitch 6 days a week. You can find a link to the multi-stream in the description box down below. Be sure to drop by and get involved. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy. Catch you next time. Peace out.